Hey again. I'm ready for chapter 2. How about you? Chapter 2 is called Two Notes from Rufus. Rufus was in my math class. I hadn't noticed him before the day he picked up my books, so I was surprised when he walked into the math class later the same day. Halfway through the class, someone behind me passed me a note. It said, "You will need 2 1/4 yards of 36-inch wide nylon, which is 97 cents a yard at Vince's, which will come to $2.18 1/4 plus sales tax." At the end of the note was a neat little drawing. It showed the pattern for the saddlebags laid on the 36-inch wide material with the length and width of each piece carefully marked. I was turning around to let Rufus know that I got the note when Mr. Conti, our math teacher, called out my name. "Kate McKinstry," he said, "would you please bring that note to me?" Miss Conti's way of cutting down on notes in his class is to read aloud every one he spots going around. It was just my luck to get caught with the first note anybody had ever passed me in his class. The kids around me were snickering. They hadn't been a juicy note laugh for at least a week, and I guess because I was a new kid, everybody was watching to see how I'd manage in a tight spot. The last thing I wanted to do was get Rufus in trouble. I tried to look very innocent, and I said, "It's not exactly a note, Mr. Conti." "Well, what exactly is it?" Mr. Conti asked. I felt my face getting red, but I stuck to my explanation. "It's kind of a math problem," I said. "Then I'd be even more interested in seeing it," Mr. Conti said. There wasn't anything I could do except take the note up to Mr. Conti. He read it to himself and then looked up kind of surprised. "Believe it or not," he said to the class, "it is a math problem, and the answer looks right, but I think we'd better check it out." And what happened then was Mr. Conti went to the chalkboard and copied off Rufus's pattern for saddlebags. He wrote in the measurements for each piece of the pattern: 16 inches by 14.5 inches and 16 inches by 8 1/4 inches, and so on. Rufus had everything down to fractions of an inch. You hear those fractions? Then Mr. Conti asked the class, "How many yards of 36-inch wide material would you need to cut out all the pieces for this pattern? And how much will the material cost at 97 cents a yard?" The class groaned. Somebody wanted to know what the pattern was for. That stumped Mr. Conti. "A blouse, I suppose," he said. He checked with me. "A blouse?" "Yes," I said, "a blue blouse." I hoped Rufus wouldn't think I was making fun of him. I sneaked a look at the back of the room, but I couldn't tell what Rufus was thinking. He was scrunched over his notebook as if he was working very hard on the problem. The answer looked very simple the way Rufus had the pattern all drawn out in the note, but it took the rest of the class the whole period to work out their answers, and everybody's answer was different. The class had that nylon costing anywhere from $2.91 up to over $10, partly because no one could figure out how to fit the pieces together of the pattern of the material without wasting a lot of cloth. I never did have to tell Mr. Conti who wrote the note. I think he might have had that idea, though, because Rufus's answers were the only ones that matched those in the note. When I went to pick up my bike after school, there was another note taped to the handlebars. In this note were 2 maps. One map showed how to get Vincent's Army and Navy on Merchant's Row, and the other showed how to get to Rufus's house from Vince's. Rufus lived only about 3 blocks from me. I rode straight down to Vince's after school. The store was in a part of town where I'd never been before, but Rufus's map was so easy to follow. I got 2 1/4 yards of the same blue nylon that Rufus's bags were made of. Then I followed the other map to his house. I didn't know if Rufus expected me to show up with the nylon so soon, but when I knocked at the door, Rufus's mother said, "You must be Kate. Rufus is in the kitchen." In the kitchen, Rufus had the pattern for the saddlebags all laid out. He had cut out the leather straps to fasten the bags with and had put buckles on the straps. Rufus gave me some pins and told me to pin the pattern shapes to the nylon. Then he cut out the pattern, and I set up his mother's sewing machine and sewed all the pieces together. But I still wouldn't have believed it if you had told me that within a year and a half, Rufus would be a millionaire. My father says it should have been obvious to anyone who could figure out within 1/4 of a yard how much material you need for a saddlebag could make $1 million making toothpaste. By supper time, the saddlebags were finished. I was amazed, but I'd never known anyone before who could make saddlebags, let alone toothpaste. So I'll see you when it's chapter 3. I told y'all fractions, you hear them all the time. Take care.